Today's video I'm going to show you how you can blur the background on a photo and also get some pretty cool effects using the blur for any sort of photos you might take. Now, this image, the background is actually slightly blurred. It was taking a while finding a photo, but I figured this would still do the trick. But it's a pretty simple process. All I need to do essentially is I need to cut out this guy and blur the background behind him, but there is a few obstacles you run into which I want to address as we go. So essentially, if I've got my photo, I can go to select and subject to select him. If you don't know how to cut out and make selections manually, so if you get a poor result from this, I do have a video I'll link to below showing you how to cut people out with the path tool, so it's a manual process you have full control over. But otherwise, select and subject to select your subject. And I'm going to go over to my layers panel here, drag to the plus symbol to duplicate that layer. And then I'm going to click this sort of box with a circle to create a mask. And you'll see if I have now two layers. If I turn off the layer underneath, the background disappears. And that's essentially what we want. We want to create something where the background is separate from the subject. Now, here's where the issue comes in. If I simply go to here and go filter, and then blur and say Gaussian blur and crank that blur right up, it doesn't look too bad, but some of his head will actually start to show through. And it's almost like the shirt's glowing a little bit. It looks a little bit, it's not quite right. You can see here if I zoom right in, the shirt kind of glows into the background. And we want to be able to take more control and not have that issue. So the way we do that, first of all, I'm going to just go to Edit, Undo, or Control Z to undo that. And I'm going to actually hold down Control on my mask, which is the white area here, and I click on it, I think it's Command on Mac, and I select that shape of that person. And then I'm going to go up to Select, Modify, and Expand Selection by, say, depending on how big the image is. If it's a small image, you might be able to get away with 3 or 4. I'm going to say 10 pixels. Now that's still a little bit close, but I'm going to bring it out a little bit more, so Expand, I'm going to say 15 again. So I've got a bit of space around my subject. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually, while I've got this layer selected, go up to Edit and Content Aware Fill. And in the preview here, you see it kind of fills in that area. And I can also go over here, move around, and I can see there's a bit of an issue where it's introducing some of the saw over here. So I can actually unpaint the saw. It'll think about it and sort of work like that. So it's not perfect, but it's good enough for what we're trying to do. I click OK. So now, if I remove the man, we got this background here where he doesn't exist. It's a bit of a funny sort of detail, but it doesn't matter because we're going to be placing him over the top of it anyway. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to right click on this layer. I can see here, this is the one without the person on it. And I'm going to convert it to a smart object. That means any filters I apply, I can actually update and change if I don't like the result. I'm not stuck with the result if I hit a filter and I can't go back in my history. So while I have this layer selected, I need to make sure it's not this one. I need to make sure the white square is around the layer that I have without the person on it. I go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and now I get a much better effect with that blurred background. But Control Z to undo. We also have some cool effects we can try here as well. I can do something such as going to Filter, Blur, and then say Motion Blur, and I can create a cool motion blurred effect behind him if I want to as well. I can try some of the various other blurs such as Blur, Radial Blur, and I can do like a zoomed effect. So it looks like he's kind of like running at you, or not really, but you can get some pretty nifty effects playing with the different blurs, especially when you go into, say, your filter, blur gallery. We can do a spin blur, something like that, and we can actually take more control over what we're doing with that and work on some cool effects that way. So by playing with these different blurs, or even the path blur, I can create some pretty nifty effects. I can create like a weird path behind him and get like a bit of a trippy sort of blur effect with that. So it's not just the Gaussian blur. You can actually get a range of effects in the background when using this this technique. And of course, you can add in anything in the background you want to as well to expand from there. So a quick and easy one for you today. I hope that made sense. If you want more Photoshop tutorials, please follow my channel for more, or leave a comment with any issues you may be having, and we'll go from there. Thanks for watching the video, and I hope to see you again next time.